Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cy Huffer and Friends. This is a podcast designed to help you flourish at life and relationships. I'm your host, Cy Huffer, lead pastor at the Gathering Christian Church in Naples, Florida. And if you want to follow along on our podcast, you can do that on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. We also have an Instagram handle at Cy Huffer and Friends with little reels that show you just kind of what dropped every Thursday. The way this podcast works, if you're new to this, is that I believe that I have the best friends in the whole world, and that they make me flourish at life and relationships, and that me sharing them with you will help you flourish in those areas as well. And so that's what we're doing today. One of my best friends of all time is on, JD Lyonhart, and he's going to share. I'm so excited about today because today we're going to cover the topic of Can I Ask That? It's one of our episodes where we just ask questions about Jesus and church and faith. And John is how I know him, is
It's JD. It's JD from now on, Huffer.
JD from now on. JD, John, is one of my best friends from college. He has a PhD in philosophy and theology from Cambridge, is currently a professor of those areas at Jamestown University in North Dakota, and he's written several books we'll talk about today, has spent his whole life wrestling with the biggest questions of life. And so I'm super excited to have him on board today. So John, tell us a little bit about your family and what you do and your story and ministry even.
Yeah, so my partner is Madison. We got married almost 15 years ago. Cy was in the wedding, so gave one of the speeches. I met her at Ozark, just like you met Monica. And we hated each other at first, which is kind of, that's sort of my shtick, right? Is never quite fitting in initially, and then you have this sort of conflict and tension, and then it eventually resolves. That, as in life and philosophy, so with Madison, we didn't get along initially, but eventually she repented of her ways and realized she was crazy about me, and we got married. And then we moved to Vancouver, Canada, where we did I was a minister at a Chinese Mennonite church for 5 years, which is still, yeah. So I was very large in the congregation. I'm a large person. They called me Godzilla, which is actually Japanese, but if they're self-saying it, it's not offensive, I guess. So yeah, we did that. But after 5 years, we decided to go do doctoral work. So we moved to the UK, and we had surprise pregnancy with twins, which is to introduce the next part of our story. I have two sons, 7-year-old twin boys, Soren and Augustine, or Augustine when he's misbehaving. So we, that's kind of the family. They're great. They're wild. They're crazy. They're brilliant. They're a lot of fun kids. And my wife is doing her doctorate in history right now, specifically focusing on the history of Christianity and gender in the conservative movement in America right now. So
yeah, and tell a little bit about like your work and for your doctoral work. Like you were at Cambridge.
yeah,
Is Madison at Oxford right now?
yeah, she's in the other place.
The other place.
So we don't speak about it.
Yeah.
So I did my PhDs on philosophy of religion. And those are kind of the two areas that I always mix and match, are philosophy and religion. I'm always thinking about God, but in a very philosophical way. Like I bring in scripture as well, maybe not as much as Cy wants me to. This is the perennial joke, is that I don't know scripture. I just like to talk about big ideas. Hopefully I've gotten a little bit better over the years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully. Yeah. But so I like to think about God philosophically. I like to ask, is there any actual reason to believe in God? Is God a rational idea? What is the relationship between faith and doubt, science and religion? I think basically any subject that's controversial, I'm excited about, because what interests me are questions, and the juicier, more difficult, and more impactful the question, the more excited I am about it. And those areas tend to be the most taboo things, which makes them even more fun, right? Uh, so, yeah, that's where I see philosophy and religion intersecting, and from there, I kind of just study whatever philosophical religious question I'm most interested in at the moment. So at Cambridge, it was how did physics and science relate to philosophy of religion, and how is God omnipresent in a post-Einstein relativization of space and time universe. But I've never done anything on that since. And now, and so now I do a bunch of different areas. I've published a lot on film, philosophy, and religion, a decent amount on gender and philosophy and religion. My latest book is a retelling of the Moses story. The book's called Zeus Was an Atheist, an odd retelling of the Moses story, which is getting more scriptural, but then it ties into philosophy as well. So I think of myself as an interdisciplinary philosopher of religion. Philosophy and religion are the two things I most mush together, but their love child is interdisciplinary and goes all over the place. So
Absolutely. And it should. I mean, that's the stuff that we're constantly wrestling with and dealing with, is like these big ideas, and then how does that live out today in the culture and in the world? And you dive into all those different questions of in the culture and in the world, and it leads you in lots of different places. And I love that about you. And I love just, listening to you and our friends talk, and I try to take in as much as possible. You currently teach at Jamestown University.
Yeah.
Right. And so you kind of, you took an odd way to get there from Cambridge. Can you tell a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, so at Cambridge, so we did the PhD under the impression we couldn't have kids. We tried while we were doing ministry in Canada. We're told we couldn't, or that it would be very difficult. So we were like, okay, well, let's go to England. So mid PhD, we found out we were pregnant with twins, which is not what a doctoral student wishes to hear in the middle of their PhD, because PhD is a highly stressful situation. What is it, like half of doctoral students who are married get divorced mid PhD because it's so stressful? So we had the twins, and it was like, we got to finish really quickly. So we had to like finish the PhD like super fast to financially kind of survive. And in the middle of that, the pandemic happened. And England was super intense. So they shut down. You were only allowed to go outside for 30 minutes a day. So we're doing the PhD. We've got the twins now. And then our landlord in England evicted us because they wanted to sell. They didn't evict us. Evicted sounds like we did something wrong. They basically said, we're not going to rent to you because we want to sell the house. Which at the time, mid-pandemic, we couldn't go see other houses. So it was basically like, what do we do? I think in hindsight, we should have protested them kicking us out, and been like, that's not moral and maybe not legal at this time. But anyways, on 2 weeks' notice, we basically decided to move to Canada to survive the pandemic. So from finding out we were getting kicked out to leaving the country was 2 weeks. And that was crazy. And my partner is an amazing administrator, planner, but most insane 2 weeks ever with the kids there. And then we moved to Canada for a year. And then I got a job at Lincoln Christian University, which was really, we were ready to just settle down and not have anything stressful or chaotic, because the kids were born in England. They'd lived in 3 countries now. And we were just like, we want a calm, quiet, restful place to just lay down roots and give stability to our kids. So we moved to Illinois, Lincoln Christian University, which 9 months into my tenure there decided to close. But actually what they did is they weren't sure if they were going to close. So they just fired like 75% of the staff. And I was one of the remaining 25, but we then existed for 2 years in limbo, not knowing whether we would have a job or not. So then they did say, yes, we are closing now. And so then I applied at the University of Jamestown, and now I'm here. Yeah. So still nothing has happened yet. I'm waiting till the next thing drops. Like, what's next? World War III, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
I was really trying to hope we get you at Ave Maria University, which is 15 minutes from my house, because having one of my best friends 15 minutes away sounded glorious. But you're interested in Florida and the hot weather because you're from Canada. You like it chilling to the bone.
Yeah, I feel like I have more of a Viking aesthetic, or at least I want to have. I'm looking to spy, like that's what I'm striving for. Plus, I'm not Catholic. I
Yeah,
bet you
yeah.
could tempt me into it. I feel like part of the thing with me constantly wrestling with things is I'm always like, yeah, I could go that way, or I could go that way. It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
sure, I'll be Catholic. Maybe we'll see.
that's
But
awesome. Well, hey, so
so
we became friends, and I love hearing my friends share our friend story. And so, because I have my own narrative of like how we became friends, but I love hearing other people share it because I'm like, oh
okay.
yeah, I forgot about that. So can you share like how did we become friends? Like what was that process? Because you said we hate
I
each other.
honest
I don't think I hated you, but
I
maybe
was
you
talking about
felt hate
Madison.
from
I
me.
was talking about
Oh,
Madison.
oh,
I was
okay,
talking
good.
about my
Okay,
wife. Yeah, I
okay,
don't feel that way about my friends, just
oh,
the
okay.
people I have sex
Just
with.
the love of your
Um,
life. Yeah.
so I don't know what the appropriate level is. Do I have to be super appropriate because this is your church podcast? Or can I actually talk like we normally talk? Like, how superficial should I be? Uh,
Maybe in between.
in between. Okay. Uh, so, um, I first met Cy in an airport in Vancouver when he was flying back from a cruise to Alaska. Must be nice. Because we had the same we had the same youth pastor, Art Matheny. He pastored in Oklahoma and pastored Cy. And then he moved to Vancouver and youth pastored me. And so when Cy was flying through, Art's like, hey, you want to meet this guy? And I didn't want to meet this guy, but I liked hanging out with Art because I was desperate for attention and quality time. And so I went with Art to the airport and met Cy, and I absolutely, he was so annoying. He was all the things I hated about humans. He was nice and bubbly, and it's ridiculous.
The worst.
Um, it was the worst. But then I had like a pretty deep kind of conversion experience in later that year, and sort of haphazardly, without giving it much thought, said, well, I'll go to Bible college. Just like Art, my youth pastor, had. And I said, where did you go to Bible college? And he's like, you don't want to go. It's in Missouri. It's like this small town. You're from Vancouver, Canada. Like, you don't want to go there. And I'm like, no, I'll go there. Let's do it. Probably the least thought out decision ever. And I get to the dorm room they've assigned me, and across the hall is Cy. And I think that first semester, I think I was more of a cynical, or I was trying to be more of a cynical person, right? And you were more popular, more social butterfly. And I think, Vancouverites are a little suspicious of friendly people. It's like, what, what do you want? Like,
Yeah.
why are you doing this? Why are you being nice to me? And so I think the first semester, we didn't hang out too much, but then that second semester, I guess out of sheer boredom, we were in each other's rooms hanging out. George Nunemaker, your previous roommate who I would hang out with, was gone. So I guess I was left with you. And that was, I think it took a while because I think we're unlikely friends,
Hmm.
um, on the surface. And I think that's one of the things that's made our friendship deeper, is that it wasn't a natural friendship. This was forged through sheer time and proximity and life events. And so I think, you balance out a lot of things in me. Um, and I'm trying not to make the joke I was going to make there. Um, but yeah, so I think we
Yeah,
started to be friends, and then you had this really dumb idea to do ministry in Muskogee, Oklahoma.
I did.
Um,
100%.
when we were like sophomores, we're like,
Yeah.
oh, we're sophomores at Bible college. Obviously, we should go plant a church in Muskogee, Oklahoma. And
For college students. Yeah.
for college students, yeah. And so we went and did that. We did one service, nobody came, and I guess that was enough to wipe out our sophomore enthusiasm. So we were just like, well,
We
I
just
guess it
stopped.
didn't
Yeah.
work, and we gave up. But through the process of planning that, we got a lot closer.
Yeah.
And then that friendship continued. I was in your wedding. Um, I was one of your groomsmen. You were in my wedding, you were the best man. I guess it's not a mutual relationship. But it's it's always, and you know what, I'm joking there, but I think it, until even just the last 5 to 10 years, I think there was always an imbalance because you were always the golden boy, and I was always like that weird friend who was like, why does Cy hang out with him? uh, and I had to go get a PhD to like balance that out.
Okay.
Was like you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
So
I think, yeah, that's the cool thing about Jesus and the church is, there's several times in the Bible where it says like there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave or free, male nor female, but we're all one in Christ. And you have this beautiful picture of like the world finds belonging typically towards like agreement, alignment, and ideals, or like affinity. Like, hey, we both like sports, or we both work at this place. Proximity is another big thing too, and to have deep friendships that are not based on any of those things, really is but they're based on Jesus and the church. It brings all these different groups that aren't usually together, and we're super different. I'm from the Midwest, born and raised in the church, right? You're from Vancouver, Canada, a city which is
yeah,
gorgeous, most beautiful cities. I was told for 20 years of our friendship now that it's the most livable city in North America, right?
you've never heard that enough, I guess.
No, not enough. I love shallow conversations. I love small talk. I'm not a fan of deep conversations. You would rather never have small talk ever again and have deep conversations almost solely, right? Like there's like
Yeah.
all these
I
things that we have. Go ahead.
I have hair. You
You have
used to have
hair. I do
hair.
not. I
You
know. I
you
remember one
you
time in
went
our
you
friendship,
Prince Williamed it. Sorry, go ahead.
you were like, called me. You're like, hey, we okay? And I was like, yeah, yeah. If you said, are we like, I feel like we're not like as close anymore. I'm like, you're like one of my top 3 best friends of all time. And you said, Cy, we haven't talked in 6 months. And I was like, it was before we did like our nightly like accountability call.
Yeah.
And for me, like quality time, having those conversations doesn't feel that's not my love language, right? And yet for you, like that was huge. And you were like, we need to talk at least once a month. And I was like, okay, because I love you and because I care deeply about you, I'm going to make that adjustment in my life because I want our friendship to remain the way it is, right? And that's give and take. And then you've done the same thing for me. And so I think that it is beautiful to just think about our story and how God has brought us together and the different ways we've approached faith. You talk a little bit about your faith background. Did you grow up in church? Did you not? You said you had a deep conversion in high school. So like, what was your faith like leading up to that?
Yeah, so my family didn't go to church when I was younger. There were some life events that led to us going to church when I was a bit older. But I think at an age where it wasn't like my native kind of
Mm.
world. Like I don't have those like all those Bible songs memorized. And like I think I only really memorized the books of the Bible when I had my own kids and sang them those songs. Like a lot of the basics of the Christian world and Christian culture as well, right? Like Veggie Tales. People are always quoting Veggie Tales, and I'm like, yeah, those tomatoes. Like I didn't have that background. And Vancouver is intensely secular. It's the least churched city in North America. I think it's less than somewhere in the 1 to 2% of the population goes to church on a weekly basis. So it's kind of the opposite of the Midwest or the Bible Belt, right? And so like we started going to church, but it wasn't like I was a church person. And like we went to church, but it was kind of like for community for a little bit. And I was a pretty skeptical person, so I was like, well, God doesn't exist, free will is dumb, do what you want. But I think I had some moments of real faith, like encounters even amidst that skepticism. But it wasn't until um Art Matheny, our shared youth pastor, came that I think his discipleship and his just unconditional love.
Mhm.
He was just so supportive all the time. Like I would do crazy stuff to try to push him away. I went up in front of an audience and gave him flipped him the middle finger. Oh, I actually just did it to you. Sorry. I flipped him the middle finger once in front of all of these other pastors and youth kids at like a youth event, and he just didn't even get mad. I went up and slapped him in the face one time and then just ran away, like hard. Like I hit him hard. And like I think it really pissed him off, but he just kept coming. He didn't
Yeah.
give up. He didn't stop loving me and supporting me. And like he's I literally I'm like, I think he might be an angel, like secretly in disguise. I don't think his wife thinks that, but like I think he like he I could I if we got to the end and he was like, I was an angel the whole time, I'd be like, I knew it. You
I
know what
knew
I
it.
mean? Like that moment with Thor and the hammer with Captain America. Like I knew it.
Yeah.
He just loved me so unconditionally. He showed me that type of love, and that I think that meant that whereas everyone else got stuck in the weeds of my deep questions, he just sort of went around that to my
Mhm.
heart. Because I'm a very thinking person, but I'm also a very feeling person. And so those two things are both very real for me at the same time. Um, and so he just he earned it. I don't want to do like a works-based salvation, but he earned myself, or rather, God through him. He just got me there.
Mm.
Um, and I won't go into all the details of my actual
Yeah.
like conversion moment, but it happened at the end of grade 12 on a trip. And I just kind of had a moment where I just sort of broke down. We'd had some family deaths. My parents had just gotten divorced in my grade 12 year at the start of the year. And grade 12 is already confusing enough as it is, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then Art talked everyone into going onto this trip with the youth group, and I was sick. I broke my toe in one of my feet, and then I stepped on a nail in the other foot. Foot. So I was having trouble walking, and then I was sick, and it was hot because we were in Mexico, and I just kind of had like I I'm just broken moment. I need help, and I don't think I would have articulated it that way at the time, but I think what I was saying is I need a savior. And that I think that realization led to my first genuine prayer that was self-initiated, not like in a group, just like alone in the dark praying. And like when I came back that week, I literally was like, I think I'm going to go to Bible college. So it was kind of like a leap from I don't believe to I believe and I'm going to Bible college all very quickly.
Yeah.
Um, though in hindsight, I think God had been doing things in with me for years, and it's hard because I think our culture kind of emphasizes the radical conversion moment because that's a better story, and I think I've emphasized that side, but like we were going to church for a few years before that as well, right? So I think it's all of these things at once. So
Absolutely. Yeah. It
what?
reminds me of like there's a leadership book that talks about it's called Built to Last. All these organizations that have lasted for decades and are always successful. And they're interviewing one of the CEOs, and he says, talking about him being an overnight success. And he says, "Yeah, we're like every overnight success. We were 20 years in the making." And I love that
Yeah,
statement because I think it's true of like evangelism and conversion and giving your life to Jesus. Like, yeah, there's a moment. Like there is typically like this moment or this song or something that got through to you or to that person that made them say, okay, I'm going to jump over this broad ugly ditch called faith, right? But when you look back, like you said, there's typically that was 10-15 years in the making that led to that moment. And I think that we've talked a lot about your own story and all those moments that led to you saying yes to Jesus. It's the same thing, but
yeah,
we don't. A lot of times we don't see all those little moments in the moment, right? You mentioned this briefly. I want to double down this for the rest of our time. But you mentioned you're a deep thinker, and you had these big questions about faith and Jesus and Christianity and church and religion, and Art kind of went around them. and,
yeah,
and really went to your heart. And it reminds me of the Samaritan
yeah,
woman in John 4. It's like she has all these questions, and
yeah.
Jesus kind of goes around them and addresses the heart issue, right? But let's talk about it because those questions kept you from Jesus. Like these things are things that like for you, they were like blocks, they were obstacles, they were things that you were wrestling with. Like what kind of questions? Like what are we talking about that
Yeah.
kept you from saying, yeah, I want to dive into Jesus?
Yeah. So I think in high school, and it depends on which season of life we're talking about. And I'm happy to talk about all the different seasons. But I think in
Yeah.
high school, the big ones were um, free will.
Mm,
I did not believe free will made sense. And honestly, I've gotten to the point where I believe in free will, but like I was never satisfied with any of the answers I've really ever heard. Like
mhm.
I literally like this was my first book because I was dissatisfied with the other books, right?
Yeah.
Which might show you the extent of my arrogance. Um it's okay. Sai's been praying for me, people. But like free will was a hard one. Because for me, free will also is connected to whether morality means anything, like whether our choices to love or to not love are significant. Um, and and also, if free will doesn't exist, it's very hard for me to understand the problem of evil and
Mhm.
why God has allowed such suffering. Yeah, so I don't think free will solves the problem of evil and pain and suffering, but I think it makes it a lot easier to swallow, right? And when it comes to philosophy and theology, you don't really get definitive certain answers. I don't even think you get definitive answers in any area, to be honest. But I think you get degrees of probability, and I think free will is a key piece to making the religion thing plausible.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was one I really struggled with. I don't really struggle with it anymore, um, because I've kind of gone through stages. I think the high school stage was just every single question rapid fire all at once, right? Like all of the questions from silly stuff like, wait, there's this discrepancy between where Jesus turned over the tables in the temple in the Gospels. You know, stuff that's like really easily answerable if you take a minute to actually study it, to stuff like morality and suffering and Old Testament genocide. It was all just mixed in together.
Mhm.
And I think to at the time that it was intellectual in high school, intellectual questions, but they were very emotional at the same time. It, you know, like they were all, you know, I was mad at God and I was hurt
Mhm.
and I was untrusting. And I think the emotional intellectual go hand in hand. I think you can't totally parse those out. Um, and at least for me. Um,
Yeah,
so
absolutely. No,
and
and I think
yes, go ahead.
I want to point out to people who are out there because our church is very much filled with people who didn't grow up in church. This is not the Bible Belt. A lot of people who live here are from the Northeast, and so it's not like I agree. Like, a lot of them grew up Catholic culturally. Like that was just kind of what we did because we're also Italian or Irish or whatever. Um,
Yeah,
but it wasn't like that committed faith that you see a lot in the Bible Belt, where it's like, hey, Jesus is a real person. We're following him. Like this is like, which can also be cultural, right? But it's very interesting to hear people who have a lot of these philosophical questions about the problem of evil and suffering, um, free will, morality. And when you start digging in, you find out like, oh, you struggle with the problem of evil and suffering because you had a miscarriage, or your dad died when you were really young. And it is a lot of that emotional moments in life that led to those types of thinking. Because a lot of times, I think most people in the world are just trying to make sure their kids have their lunches packed, that the bills
yeah,
are paid, and to have the space and the time to like wrestle with these questions takes time, takes space.
yeah,
And
yeah.
usually a life event is what forces that to happen. So can you talk a little bit about like it's weird, like I had these questions, I still have them, but I have faith. So like how did following Jesus, giving your life to Jesus, becoming a Christian, that conversion moment, how did it change or impact those questions? Did you keep asking them? Like how do you wrestle with them now?
Yeah, so I would say the first 10 years or so of my faith was about figuring out whether this was a huge mistake or not. Like I think the first 10 years of my faith were like, okay, I've had this encounter, this experience, this sense that I am loved by a love that's so deep it would die for me. I'd had that sort of encounter, but the questions were still there. And so the first 10 years of my faith were, okay, how rational is that love? So I dove into apologetics, like a lot of new Christians do. I was looking at the arguments for the existence of God, arguments from the origins of the universe, the Big Bang, arguments from design. And I don't think that arguments from design and biology are very strong, or but I think that arguments from design when it comes to the nature of the universe are very strong. Like the initial conditions of the universe in order to eventually permit life had to be so finely tuned that it's one out of trillions of trillions of trillions with lots of like all these zeros behind it. It's incredibly specific, right? Now, does that prove that God exists? Not necessarily, but it's not nothing, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's alternatives to that. Like some people have said, well, what if the multiverse is true? What if there's an infinite number of universes? Then if there's an infinite number, eventually one of them, no matter how unlikely, will eventually result in a universe that can lead to intelligent life, right? Because if you have an infinite number of lottery tickets, eventually one of them will strike it rich, right? So just because the universe seems incredibly precisely tuned for life doesn't mean it needed God. There are other explanations for that, potentially, right? Such as a multiverse.
Yeah.
But once you start to stack these arguments together, they start to create a cumulative case where none of them quite gets you over that 51%, 49% line on their own. You start to stack them together. You stack together that who made the Big Bang go bang? You stack that needing of a cause combined with the initial conditions of the universe being so seemingly designed for intelligent life. Then you combine that with, say, our experiences of morality and beauty. I think those point to something beyond themselves as well. That's often the third classical arguments for the existence of God. Basically, I'll start with morality, but is this what you want? Do you want me to keep doing this?
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So, I think there's a couple. I don't think that you have to believe in God in order to be a good person. There are lots of religious people who are absolute dicks. And there's a lot of non-religious people who are just the best, right? Like we all intuitively know that because we've met other humans. I don't think you need to believe in God to be a good person. But if God doesn't exist, I'm not sure the word good has any objective meaning. Right? That's a different type of argument. I'm not saying you need to believe in God to be good. I'm not saying you even need to read the Bible to be a decent person. Rather, I think if the universe does not have some sort of absolute transcendent divine reference point, that things like morality are just social constructs we've invented. And let me play that out a bit more. In the religious account of how we got morality is not something God invented. It's not like God made up a rule and said, hey, don't kill each other and don't have sex before marriage because I'll know I'm watching. It's not like God invented those rules. It's that before the universe began, before time and space itself, God was goodness. God doesn't invent goodness. God is goodness. The Bible, 1 John, doesn't say that God invents love. It says God is love. God is the eternal source of right and wrong. He is love itself, eternally. And so love isn't something that began to exist. It is. It's part of God's I am. I am love. I am goodness. And so those things exist. And then God creates the universe and slowly imprints these into our hearts over so many years or whatever. That's the religious account of morality. But now let's look at the kind of standard scientific, atheistic, materialistic view of morality. In the beginning, the universe began and morality didn't exist. Love didn't exist. Yeah. And then species began to evolve and you get single-celled organisms and it goes up from there. And still morality doesn't exist yet because is bacteria immoral for, doing what it does? No, it's just being bacteria, right? And so it's through evolution that eventually you get a species like a monkey. It's not actually a monkey. It's a common ancestor of a monkey. But for simplicity, I'll just say monkey. And the monkeys that play nice together tend to do better because they have a support system. They have a network of support, and they also reproduce more because if you're around other monkeys, hey. But and so what this does is it embeds into our very genetics this need to be good and social and kind, because the more social monkeys tend to live longer because they have a support system. They reproduce more because they're around other monkeys. And so their genes get spread more because they get protected and they get reproducing more. And so over millions of years, this slowly ingrains into our species this sense that, hey, you should do right. You should be good to other people. But that's all that morality is on the atheistic equation. There's no eternal law or value called right and wrong. That's something that evolution tricked us into caring about. And so if our evolution had played out differently, the example I always use is there's a type of wasp that Darwin found that buries its way into its prey, plants its eggs, and then the eggs hatch and eat the prey from the inside out. Now, if all that morality is whatever evolution decides, then whatever we evolve to become becomes by definition the new standard for what is right and wrong. So if we'd had a different evolutionary trajectory and we've evolved to lay our eggs inside each other and eat each other from the inside out, then that would be right. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
If that's all that morality, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, and the idea that you can evolve. I mean, I'm asking you this. Like, is that kind of where the whole Holocaust kind of philosophy came from? Of like, we're evolving to a different level of morality, where like we are the superior race, and so because of that, we have a new morality that's evolving beyond the old one, which allows us, to feel like this is the right stuff to do.
So I wouldn't say that evolution means you can do whatever you want. I don't think evolution's incompatible with morality. I just don't think evolution can be the sole source of morality, right?
Gotcha.
Like,
okay.
Maybe a transcendent divine reference point for love could use evolution to imbue us with morality. But if evolution is the only thing that's creating right and wrong, then yeah, I think anything goes. Because if we evolve into a species that kills off everyone who disagrees with us, then by definition, that's the new definition of right. Because right and wrong, there's no higher standard. It's just whatever we do. And yes, if you're asking in terms of like the Nazi regime and the master race, I don't want to overstate the case because at times it's been overstated. But there is some evolutionary language of that, of the master race, that's going to select out the lesser parts of the species in order to purify the gene pool so that we're all blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryans. I mean, I don't know if that language is possible prior to evolution. But that doesn't mean evolution leads to genocide.
Sure.
But anyways, I would say, yeah.
If that's the sole standard for the source of morality,
then whatever we evolve into becomes the new definition of right and wrong. So theoretically, if the Nazis had succeeded and done it so well for like 100,000 years that they actually were able to rewrite our genetics and our needs, then there would no longer be anything wrong with that because there's not a standard higher than our evolution itself. So I think that's I don't think that's a caricature. I think that's really what the standard atheistic, I think there's ways around that, but I think most atheistic scientific materialists tend to say something like that. There's a biological origin for morality, or they say it's a social origin where societies just sort of came up with right and wrong in order to, achieve some sort of end. Like, hey, we want our citizens to stop revolting, so we're going to tell them that God rewards you for being a nice person, so they'll sit down and stop fighting back, right? Like it, or so morality is just a social construct, something we just invented, or something that biologically began to exist in our past. Either way, I think what it does is means that without God, whatever the source of morality isn't some eternal, absolute, transcendent thing. No, it's coming from us down here. It's something that is invented in time. It's something that began to exist. And if it begins to exist, then it's not really objective right or wrong. It's just someone made up the rules to the game. So like you can come and make up a new set of rules to the game. And if Hitler wants to come and make up a new set of the rules to the game, then he can. And it's not like he's wrong. You just don't like what he's doing.
Yeah.
But neither one of you is more right or wrong than the other, because there's no such thing as right or wrong. There's just inventions. Your invented social constructs, my invented social constructs, and no one's more objectively right than the other. But I think what an eternal reference point for goodness and love does is say, hey, love is not something humans just made up or that our biology tricked us into caring about. This is at the absolute heart of the universe. It's not something that began to exist. It's not something we constructed. It's not something evolution spat out, but it just as easily could have spat out a different value. No, love is the eternal heart of the universe. And I think at the end of the day, I think most people think that that's the case functionally, even if they don't actually, in theory, articulate it. I think most people live as if love, at least in our context, is if love is the meaning of the universe. And they don't think about the metaphysical implications of that. They just sort of combine that feely good loveness with sort of a materialist worldview, but those aren't really compatible, in my opinion. And I don't think of that as a faith thing. I think of that as just like being honest philosophically. Bertrand Russell, perhaps the most famous atheist of the 20th century, probably of all time, said that if God doesn't exist, the question of what is the meaning of life is meaningless. Like there is no meaning. You get to create whatever meaning you want, which is kind of liberating. Like, hey, I'm free to do whatever I want. But it also means that there is no meaning. If you want to live a life of selfishness, go and chase that dream, because you can invent whatever you want. There's no prior eternal standard that's going to judge you. It's all invention.
I love that. You know, I think it's helpful to think about morality, like, you know, like the 10 Commandments or whatever, God creating like morality, almost like how our Constitution was created, you know, in America, where it was like, hey, let's get those guys into the room and write it all down on paper. Like, let's get the best minds in the room to figure out what the best rules are for us to be governed. And it's like, that's, you know, that may have been in the past my picture of morality. It's like, okay, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, let's get together. Okay, what's number one? You know, like what's the first commandment? And no, it's a lot more of just like, this is who I am. I am these things, and I'm going to make you in my image and create this universe, you know, with my fingerprints in it, with the setup of it to be a reflection of me. And so if I'm this way, the best way for this universe to function is to function the way I am, you know, right?
Yeah.
And I love that picture of it, because over the whole story of the Bible, God's been revealing who he is to us through the law, through this people, and then ultimately and fully and completely in the person of Jesus. And it's like, okay, now you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Okay, now you get a picture of what the Father is, what love is, which is that picture of Jesus on the cross, which is just the epicenter of our faith. And I think it's every relationship, you know?
Yeah.
It's like the epicenter of every relationship. If you can do this, die for the other, that's the best way to make these relationships work.
Yeah. No, and I think that's really helpful to say that is that I think a lot of people think, okay, you need God to tell you what is right or wrong, right? Like we need the 10 Commandments in our schools, or these kids are going to have monkey sex with each other. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of like what they think this is. And it's like, no, the argument I just made is an argument that would be true even if the Bible didn't exist, and even if the 10 Commandments didn't exist. Like, this is an argument about whether morality is a real thing in the universe. And I think that changes the equation. And as you said, if you're imagining God as like Zeus up on a cloud who's with his friends, like, hey, Hermes, what do you think I should tell the humans to do next? Like, do you think we should make a law about this? And then they like debate about it and send it down. If you're picturing the gods inventing morality like that, then of course that is meaningless, because it's as much of a social construct as it would be for us to invent morality. You know, like it's still something invented. But if you're instead picturing morality as what God is, if you're picturing God as eternally goodness and love itself, then that's a very different thing. It's not God invented the rules. It's God is goodness. God is love eternally. Before time even began, love was. And so love isn't, so it's not constructed, it's not invented, it's just the fabric of reality. I
Mhm.
think that really does change things. And I think it's true to the biblical God, who is not a creature, who is not an idol made with creaturely hands. He's beyond those things. Um, so I think it's much more interesting when you start thinking about God in those ways as the eternal divine source of the universe, who is love itself. It changes the discussion, and I think this is where the Trinity becomes interesting, because how can God be love itself if God is alone?
Mm. Yeah.
You know, if love isn't something God invented, but what God is, how does this isolated individual express the fullness of love? Love is a communal thing. Well, I think that's where the Trinity comes in, is that what God eternally is a community of love. And so love and love for others isn't like something God later invented, like, oh, you know what would be cool? What if I make other beings? I feel lonely. If I make
Yeah.
other beings, we
Yeah.
can love each other. Oh, what's
Mhm.
love? Oh, I guess that feels nice. Let's do that. No, it's like at the heart of all of existence, the eternal, divine, absolute is a community of love.
Mm.
And so if we're made in the image of that entity, if that entity is at the heart of all of existence, then the meaning of existence would to be to develop communities of love.
Mhm.
Communities where neither the individual is trampled by the community nor vice versa, but the two are held in tension, where the more the community loves the individual, the fuller and more real the individual themselves is in all of their idiosyncrasies, right? Like
Mhm.
even our relationship right here, right? Like you and I have this unity, this friendship, but we're very different and distinct, and yet we love each other through that. I think that's the image of the Trinity right here. You know, and this feeds into the arrogance I was talking about earlier, because I, I am the
I just heard
Trinity.
John say we were the Trinity. Is what I heard.
No,
Um, so I want to do so. So we just took one big question about kind of free will, the problem of evil, and engaged it. And I wanted to just let that go for a moment because I want to show you um, that this is what John's books are filled with. And this is what John's work is filled with. He takes this stuff that can be dry sometimes, can be hard to understand, can be complicated, and he makes it like, I don't know if it's infuse is the right word. He infuses it with, film and humor and art and beauty. I mean, John's one of the best preachers and communicators. He's a fantastic writer. One of my favorite books he's written is not published right now, and it's just this fiction of this story. And he's incredibly gifted. And actually, one of our friends here in Naples, his favorite book of all time is John's book, The Journey of God, because of how John just makes these things that maybe you want to learn about, you want to study, but when you open, an apologetics book or you open the philosophy of history by Bertrand Russell, it's dry and it's hard and it's a chore. And so, John, I want to just do an exercise with you real quick. I'm going to talk about three of your books, okay? Monotheism, Journey of God, and Zeus Was an Atheist. Your newest one.
yeah,
I love how you have kind of always a person in mind when you write. It's like, hey, I wrote that for, this. Okay, I'm gonna let you. So I want you to talk about like, who did you write monotheism for? And, in 30 seconds to 2 minutes, like, if you're struggling with these kinds of questions, this book is really good for you. So let's do monotheism first, and then we'll go through the next two.
yeah. So I would say monotheism is the most academic of the three you wrote, but it's also in some ways the most story driven, which is kind of odd.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
because it's a conversation between three people at a pub, and they're basically arguing about uh, whether free will makes sense, whether the Trinity makes sense, and they're kind of like, no, it doesn't. They don't
Yeah.
make sense. But then they start looking at the origins of the universe and start evaluating it the same way they evaluated the Trinity and free will. And they realize that the origins of the universe also doesn't make sense. No one can really make sense of how we began to exist. And as they look at those three conversations, free will, the Trinity, and the origins of the universe, they begin to notice patterns. The same sort of problems, philosophical, conceptual issues that occurred for free will and the Trinity seem to reappear when we talk about how the universe began to exist. And as they draw these parallels closer and closer together, they begin to realize that what if those aren't three separate conversations, but the same conversation in three different contexts? What if the Trinity doesn't make sense, and the free will doesn't make sense, and the origins of the universe don't make sense, and they all don't make sense in precisely the same way and for precisely the same reason? And so they never quite solve how it makes sense. But the argument then is, well, if none of these three make sense, is the Trinity and free will as rational to believe in as our own existence?
Mm.
And are these actually free, separate instances? Or for the Christian, are these actually the same conversation all along? Because Christians believe that the Trinitarian God freely chose to create the cosmos, and that act of creation of the beginning of the universe is a Trinitarian and free act. And so these aren't three separate discussions, they're the same discussion. And given that everybody believes the universe began to exist, like it's not a religion thing, right? Like, everyone believes you're here, right? In that case, it's not a problem that a religious person must solve in order to make sense of the Trinity. It's a problem for all humans. And as soon as you've solved it, I would say you've also solved free will and the Trinity. And so that means free will and the Trinity shouldn't hold you back from faith, because it's not just a problem for the religious person or for the Christian. The problem at the heart of it is the same one at the heart of all of existence. And exactly how that parallel is made is obviously the next question, but I think that's where I would say go read the book, because that gets too complicated for here.
Absolutely.
And I'd say the person I wrote that for in mind would not necessarily be an academic, but someone who's interested and has a good mind, even if they never follow. Like, you don't need, I would say any person who has a good mind and is interested would find that book helpful. But if they're not interested in it and they're not like a deep thinker, I would say maybe don't read that one. I could maybe read maybe read these other two books instead, because that of the three you listed, that's the most academic.
Yeah. Talk about Journey of God. Who'd you write Journey of God for?
Yeah, Journey of God is kind of like my attempt to do an intro to Christianity book. Like, I think I was thinking of Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis's version of that, like an attempt to say, hey, what's Christianity? Here's Christianity in a book, right? I'm not saying it's as good as his, but I'm saying that's what I was trying to do, trying and failing. Great. Journey of God is basically, it's my story, because I tell my story in it, but it's also the biblical story. Like, we start with the beginning of the universe, we work through the Old Testament, we get to Jesus, the church, the Holy Spirit, the end of the world, and we end with the book of Revelation. So it's meant to be, an overview of the Bible, but an overview of the Bible paired with my personal stories and paired with philosophical, scientific, historical discussions. So like when we're looking at the first chapter of the Bible, Genesis 1, we get into science for it's a science discussion, but I think the science actually helps us understand the text better. And I try to, I do that all the way through, is I try to make it not merely what does the Bible say, but is this rational to believe in? Is this a reasonable book to believe in? So it's meant to be that kind of one book that you just sort of hand someone at any kind of stage. If they're not a Christian, but they're interested in finding out what this faith thing is about and why you believe it, this is kind of the book I would use for that. Or at least that's why I wrote it. And I don't think it requires anybody. I don't think it requires like a super high level of, I think the average person could read it, hopefully, though I think it does incline a little philosophical, because I'm a philosopher, right? But that's what Journey of God was.
And I remember you saying you kind of wrote that for thinking about like yourself in high school. Like, if I could have had the book, this is what I would have loved to have read. Where was that book? Well, I'll write that book, or I'll try to write that book. So you did. It's incredible. And then Zeus was an atheist, your newest one. Like, who is this for, and what issues is it dealing with that could be helpful for someone?
Zeus was an atheist, an odd retelling of the Moses story. It is what it says. It's an odd retelling of the Moses story. It's sort of biblical fiction. I start with Moses talking about his time in Egypt, and we end up with him dead in the desert. So it's telling his story, and it's. I think the real question I'm trying to answer there is how this God isn't just like all of these other claims of religions. There's a famous quote from an atheist. I think it might be Richard Dawkins, but it might be someone else, which is, you're an atheist about thousands of these other gods. Some of us just go one God further. And as soon as you give me your reason why you don't believe in all these other religions, that would be the same reason I would give you for why I don't believe in yours, right? And what I'm doing is using the story of Moses to kind of stumble on how this God is different. Moses has this encounter with God in the burning bush, and he asks God what his name is. And God doesn't say Stephen or Raoul or something like that. He says, I am. He says, I am. That's my name. I am the one who is existence itself. And I think what's really interesting when you compare the God of Moses to, say, like Zeus, who's in the title of the book. Zeus was an atheist. Zeus was born. Even in Greek mythology itself, Zeus has a dad, and his dad has a dad. And Zeus's dad actually ate all of his siblings and tried to eat Zeus as well, right? And if you go back far enough, Zeus's great-grandfather isn't actually a person. In the Greek mythological universe, it's chaos. The gods and the universe are born not from an eternal source of love and goodness and intelligence. No, they're born from chaos. They spring from the chaos. And so at the heart of all of the Greek mythological universe is not divinity, it's actually atheistic materialism. That there is no underlying pattern or mind or heart or love or morality at the source of all things. There's just chaos. And so in that sense, hence the title, Zeus was an atheist. Zeus didn't believe in an eternal divine figure. Zeus is only a god in the same way that we might seem like a god to an ant. He's a creature. He's not the creator. He's a creature. A super awesome creature, a super powerful creature, but a creature nonetheless. And he's not really all that different from modern superheroes. And the parallel becomes more explicit with Thor, who's both, right? Like, I think a lot of the religions of the world have gods like Thor, gods who are born and then can die. And so these aren't really the creator of the universe. They're just creatures that began to exist. They're not really what I mean by God. In the Jewish Christian system, they'd be more like angels and demons. Like it's not like our God just so happens to be right and theirs are all just wrong. It's that a lot of these religions aren't even talking about God to begin with. They're talking about creatures. Awesome, super powerful creatures like Iron Man, but still creatures nonetheless who begin to exist. And I think the more interesting question is this I am question. Is there a God who is the source of all being and existence itself? A God who isn't just another being or another creature, but is being itself. A God who, when asked his name, does not give one finite specific answer like I'm Ra, or I'm Nut, or I'm Zeus, but instead says, I am. I am the one who is, who eternally is, who existed before the beginning of the universe itself. I am not a being, but rather being itself. And I think once you start thinking about God in that way, it totally changes the question. It radically changes the question. It eliminates a lot of religions. It doesn't eliminate all of them. I think Hinduism has a really interesting notion of Brahman that's comparable to that. And that's one of the questions I'm really wrestling with right now. But I think once you appreciate that, like, Zeus was an atheist in the way that matters, right? Because in the Greek mythological universe, is there an eternal source of love and goodness itself? No. Those are social, biological constructs. Is there a source of all being? No. Everything just sprang randomly from chaos. There's no meaning to the universe or purpose. And so a lot of the things that people define as religious, I would define as ultimately atheistic. And I think a lot of people who think they're atheists, if they actually look at how they live and what they really believe at a deep level, are actually religious, because they're still acting like these social constructs and evolutionary byproducts mean more than what materialism says they mean.
Absolutely. Oh, and if you don't understand the chaos that produced Greek mythology, just go watch the Odyssey and you'll see it.
There we go. It's all over the screen, that chaos. So,
hey, I'm going to close this out here with one more question. Okay. If just talk to someone in my church, someone who's out there who's for somehow stumbled upon this episode today, if they're wrestling with these kinds of questions, philosophy, theology, these like free will, problem of evil and suffering, a Trinitarian God, the existence of the universe, how would you encourage them? What would you say to them?
buy my book. I like tease up this perfect pastoral movement. Like, all right, bring us home, bring us to Jesus now, Jonathan. And I'm like, give me money,
give me money.
No, I would say just don't give up. I think a lot of us have really bad experiences with religion, spirituality, and like I have those. Like, I don't trust people naturally, and I would just say, like, as someone who's spent a lot of time thinking, I don't have all the answers, but sometimes an atheistic scientist comes forward and says something about religion, and everyone's just like, well, therefore that's what smart people think. And that's just not the case. Like, if you go to places like Oxford or Cambridge or Harvard, at those levels, there are brilliant minds who believe in God, and there are brilliant minds who don't believe in anything. And so, like, if your mind is telling you that you can't be a thinking person and believe in religion, I don't want to say you're wrong, but I just want to say keep going, because there are some people out here who are having good conversations that get to a deeper level. Mm-hmm. Don't give up. And because for me, like, I think when you actually understand the alternative to religion, I think the question becomes a lot more like, whoa, does life have meaning? Do my experiences of beauty and goodness mean anything more than just like an evolutionary byproduct? And I just as easily could have been inclined biologically to make webs out of my butt, and that would be as meaningful as what I call morality today, because that's just how I evolved. I think once you start to understand that bigger picture, you understand that the God question isn't just about whether there's an old man in the clouds who sees you when you're sleeping and knows when you're awake. Like, no, it's bigger than that. The God question is the question at the heart of existence. About like, it's the question without which all other questions have no meaning, in my opinion. And that doesn't mean God is real. I actually think God might not be real, and none of this means anything. I'm scared by how possible that possibility is. So if you're in that space, that's a reasonable place to be. But I also don't think it's very livable. And yeah. I think there comes an honest point where someone has to align their emotions, their actions, and their mind, and place an actual bet on what they think reality is. And at least for me, I came to that point, and I placed my bet on religion. I don't blame you if you place it on like materialism and nihilism. I get it. I don't think that's the bet most people actually want to make. I think they think they have to be smart or intelligent or sophisticated. And I don't know everything, but I've met some of the most brilliant people in the world, and they don't know everything either.
Yeah.
So like, don't feel like you have to think something. Just pause with yourself and think, like, what do I actually believe about the universe? Do I believe right and wrong are real objective things? Well, what does that entail? Right? and sit with those experiences of beauty and love and goodness long enough and see where they lead you.
Yeah. That's so good, man. It reminds me of just kind of Anselm saying that it's not understanding that produces faith. Once I figure all this out and it all makes sense, then I'll believe, right? It's faith is a choice that then seeks to understand it, but probably will never understand everything. Actually, won't understand everything, but chooses to believe in spite of understanding. And so, dude, that you're just a model of that, example of that for your whole life. I love you, dude. So proud of you and all that you do and the way in which you serve the kingdom and Jesus and your family. And so thank you so much for your time, man. Really, really, really appreciate it. Super good stuff.
Yeah, man, I'm always happy to just talk. I love talking at people. So this was lovely.
Especially when they don't
It's
talk back.
well, yeah, you keep asking. You have follow-ups, which is annoying, but
Yeah, you're welcome.
thanks for
Hey,
having me.
absolutely, dude. Hey, everybody else, great having you here today. As always, remember you can follow on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. And remember that you were made for more. So don't settle for anything less. Have a good day.